This is Liz. That's her executive assistant.
Here.
Is there a cell phone? Yeah, I'll give it.
Yes. And then they talk now. Let me see. Yes. You want me to give you the NDA?
Good morning, everybody. Magandang umaga. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat.
Magandang umaga po.
Yes, I am very glad that all of you answered our call for this press conference. My name is Loida Nicolas. I am the chair of the US Pinoy for Good Governance, the sponsor, and and with me, they will introduce themselves later on, are some of our co-sponsors in this day tomorrow, a global day of prayer. And as you probably have read from Philippine Daily Inquirer, Father Robert Reyes has also called for fasting, because in the Old and New Testament, when you really want to request God's help, you do it by prayer, which we will do tomorrow, and fasting. So I will quote the day tomorrow will be his 29th anniversary of the assassination of Ninoy Aquino, the father of our president. He said he was warned that if he comes to the Philippines on that fatal day of August 21, 1983, he would be killed. He might be killed. And he said, the Filipino is worth dying for. At this time, 29 years later, I am not asking the Filipino to die. I am asking them to fast. The Filipino is worth fasting for. Prayer and fasting. So I thank you very much. I will, there will be other statement here, and the manifesto, which is over here. The only thing I can say, and I'll be open to question and answer later on, is that we do not have the warships that China has. As you know, 75 combatants and destroyers. The Philippines has 0. They have 60 submarines. The Philippines has 0. We have 55. They have 55 amphibious ships. We don't have really one, except our Gregorio del Pilar, a frigate. They have 85 mission-equipped patrol craft. We do have one. They have 300,000 Navy and Coast Guards ships. We have 120 patrol ships. But for their warships, we have worship. We worship the Lord, and that is our big fight. As they say in Chronicles in the Old Testament, do not be afraid or dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Thank you.
Do you already have your press kits, Francis Indonesia? Andre, you can get your press kit from Andrea. And then we would also like to request you to sign in. The beautiful girl there is the sister of Andre. She will be getting your signatures. So ma'am, with your permission, this is how the program will go. We're about to start the press con. We will request our speakers that are here at the forum, seated in front of you, to to say a little something about themselves, and then what is it they want to say about this property issue. Self-introduce and then say something about this property issue. Okay?
Okay, well, for the US Pinoys for Good Governance, directly from New York, we have two members. Joe Ramos, he is also the Knight Commander of the Knights of Rizal, Chapter Commander of New York in the Knights of Rizal. And we have Von Santos, an entrepreneur, businessman. He is from New York, and he was the first one to discover last year this $1 billion worth of the huge oil rig. And that's why we had the rally last year, July 8th. That is Von Santos. So I give you first US Pinoys for Good Governance, Joe Ramos.
Hello everybody, my name is Joe Ramos, and I'm the coordinator of the US Pinoy for Good Governance in New York. I got involved with the US Pinoy in 2011 when we started mapping out for the demonstration in front of the US Embassy in New York. The issue then was the China consulate, not embassy. The issue then was the Spratly Islands. And so we were there. I remember, as usual, Mrs. Lewis has always been our leader. And when she leads an organization, you can just imagine how many people are inspired to join her, because being with her alone is like something, you know. So we were like over 100 in our work during our rally. And then the second demonstration we had was about the Scarborough Shoal issue in 2012. We demonstrated in the United Nations, in front of the United Nations, together with our Vietnamese brothers. And there were so many of us also who were there. And the theme then was boycotting the goods made in China. So up to now in New York, people are so very aware about not going to Walmart, which has most of its product from China, the 99-cent stores, and all the stores that carry made in China goods. And, you know, by word of mouth, family to family, there are so many of us that are boycotting now. Instead of buying Chinese shirts, for example, Chinese-made shoes, or other things, we go for something other brand. So on August 21st, I'm supposed to be one of the coordinators of the Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Unfortunately, I'm here, and the one who is taking care of that is Dr. Angie Cruz, and being helped by Vivian and other US Pinoy for Good Governance members. So that's about what I can say about myself for now. Thank you.
Von Santos.
Good morning, everyone. As Loida said, I actually started blogging and writing about this particular issue last year, primarily because when I started, there was very little mention in the U.S. media about the Philippines' involvement with the Spratly scenario. In fact, it was mostly tagged with Vietnam and the other claimants. And I was very concerned that our government response needed to be a little more stronger, and there was very little awareness amongst the Filipino, especially the Filipino-American community, about this issue. So I want to start off by saying that right now the Philippines is running out of options. Every statistical and strategic perspective where the Filipino has a chance to secure its claims and gain against the Chinese government's ambition to take from us our land and resources tells us that we don't stand a chance, that we will lose. And according to China, if we get in the way of their plans, they will defend with military action without a question. So if we Filipinos assert our claims, we will be knocked down. This means we are expendable. We are collateral damage. We can be killed off and history can write it off later on. And they're most likely right. The scenario right now, according to the current state of affairs, leads to that kind of scenario, a very negative one. So let's just say how it is. The Americans have repeatedly stated that while there is a mutual defense treaty, the official American policy is that they will not get involved in territorial disputes. A very diplomatic way of saying to the Philippines that you're alone for now, we're not sure yet. In the last few months, China affected our banana industry, effectively stopped us from fishing in the Scarborough Shoal and halted China tourism into the Philippines. Literally with the flick of a wrist. It's like political kung fu. The collapse of the last ASEAN conference, where our Department of Foreign Affairs was disrespected, highlighted China's influence and ability to stifle a multilateral discussion. I read they even sabotaged the microphone as the Philippines began to speak. It's like watching an evil high school musical. It's almost funny, but almost. And my favorite is when China announces a fishing ban on the South China Sea for environmental purposes. To save face and for the safety of our fishermen, our president issues a simultaneous fishing ban for environmental purposes as well. And a week later, there are nearly 70-something Chinese fishing boats in the area, taking anything and everything. Meanwhile, our Filipino fishermen are looking to sell their boats and find new jobs. You know, I'm not a political analyst, but from a 10,000-foot view, that one seems like a huge joke. You know, however, it's not really funny. And as I said, the Philippines right now is running out of options. And we should be sad. Personally, I think sadness is a healthy response to this scenario. It accepts our weakness. We must be honest with ourselves and accept where we are. But I'm not here today to tell you that there's no hope and it's all dark. I'm here because I have hope. This is the fourth international event of the U.S. Pinoy for Good Governance regarding the Chinese threat. Last year in July, we held the first international protest of Filipinos worldwide at the Chinese consulates. We responded to China. We responded to China because last year they were proudly announcing their beautiful new deep-sea oil rig, the CNOP 981, and shared proudly their plans to install it 75 nautical miles from the Philippine shore. At that time last year, some of our own Filipino friends resisted the significance of this matter. Some even called us alarmists. They, as it transpired, in less than a year from that time, we find ourselves facing a naval standoff at the shoal, where international media now refers to the South China Sea as, and I quote, the next potential flashpoint for global conflict. A month after our protest, last July, we were relieved because the scheduled installation of that deep-sea oil rig did not take place. But the job was not finished. It was only just the beginning. As of May this year, that same mobile oil rig now sits 198 nautical miles southeast of Hong Kong, just 2 miles short of the 200 nautical mile economic zone limit, and many analysts are anticipating China to move it further southeast, which of course would now be in Philippine territory. The device to extract our oil and resources is inching towards us, so we're not out of the woods. So as I said, while we have the right to defend ourselves, we know we truly can't on a military level. We hope our allies will stand by us, but they do so right now at a distance. Our options run thin. But we have one thing they cannot take away from us. We have a shield. This shield is the truth. The truth of the Philippine position is the only defense we own, short of complete submission. And what is that truth? The truth that what belongs to us may be taken by force. The truth that a powerful country is at our doorsteps, ready to claim our territory. The truth that in an instant, beyond our control, we may find ourselves stuck in the middle of a no-win scenario for the Filipinos, where lives are at stake, where people will die. The truth that our government is running out of diplomatic options because China is simply too strong and influential. The truth that we need to ask for the compassion and sympathy of the world to recognize that the Filipino is worthy to help. The truth that we are a people so determined to uplift ourselves from a history of oppression, that we are a rare country where people have marched in people power to give ourselves democracy. The truth that we own is our only asset. It's like a candle in a dark room. It belongs on top of a lampstand so it can share its light to many. That lampstand is the media. You, with pens on your notepads, your fingers on your laptops, the microphones in your hands, and the cameras that you hold, you are the front line. You are the soldiers of peace. You must be that lampstand. Each time we gather for this cause, it is a statement that we say each and every one of us is worthy of freedom, and worthy to be prosperous. President Aquino and Foreign Affairs Secretary have made statements for Filipinos to unite on this cause. A leader I spoke with recently told me that, unfortunately, the world won't pay attention to our plea until people start dying. But I say no. I say we act now to preserve peace. So today, I challenge the media, especially Filipinos in media, television, radio, internet, social websites, blogs, to recognize your power to spread the truth. I challenge you to spread your reach farther than you ever have before. I challenge the media to be a hero for peace. Media, I ask you to please tell the world, please hear our cry, please feel our tears, to please help us before this spins out of control and a single person dies over this. To please recognize that we are worthy to be treated as human beings with universal rights. The truth is, we are not helpless. That is why we deserve the world's help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that spirited talk. And we also have with us from Vietnam, who is one of the founders of VOICE, Vietnamese Overseas Initiative for Conscience Empowerment, Attorney Huy Trin.
Thank you, Nicolas. Hello everyone, my name is Huy Trin. I am the Executive Director of VOICE. It's an NGO based in the US, but with an office here. I'm here with my colleagues, Nhan and Don, both of whom are also originally from Vietnam. We're here to simply say a few things about China and about the policy that we should have as a people. China is trying to divide and conquer us. They prefer only bilateral agreements with Vietnam or with the Philippines. They do not want to internationalize this. And so the Vietnamese people in the States last year, and since last year in Vietnam, have held protests many times in Saigon and many times in Hanoi, the capital city. We had the first protest in Saigon with over 3,000 people attending, and we held weekly protests last year and this year over the dispute. Our call is simple. We ask our government to unite and internationalize the issue. We prefer to go to the UN. None of us is an expert, but what we do know is that we should have a judge, a fair judge, that is not just either as China or as Malaysia, but it should be just the UN. And we should prefer to use the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Because there are not just the Philippine or Vietnam claims, but there are other claims as well. As a result, we also prefer the US recent call to internationalize it. Yes, we believe in peace. We shouldn't have any wars, but at the same time, we should raise our voice because China is or has been a bully. They have taken islands from Vietnam in the 70s, in the 80s, and if we don't raise our voice, more island will be lost. And they would just be too mighty for us. So we just stand behind you tomorrow to simply say both countries, both peoples have got to reunite and have got to raise our voice to internationalize the issue. It's like our comrade just said, the world doesn't really think about this. And yeah, they have 1 billion people. We don't have that many. So we should unite and raise our voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Hoy. And last but definitely not the least is the representative of the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches, who has probably 3 million members all over the Philippines and in the diaspora. Bishop Chito Sanchez.
Good morning to everyone. I am Bishop Chito Sanchez from the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches. We are here today as evangelicals to support our stand in this situation which is now happening in our nation. I really believe that we are in a juncture in our history where we really need to come together as a people to pray about this situation. Just like our friends from America, Filipino Americans have said, that this is such an impossible situation for the Philippines. And that we have one thing that we can hold on is the truth. The truth that our nation owns these islands and that China is basically stealing it away from us. But we physically cannot do anything but hold on to the truth. But I want to say today that if we know the truth, and the truth shall set us free, because the Bible says that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So what we can do today is come before the Lord, just like Mrs. Lewis here has been challenging all of us, is to come together tomorrow to pray, to fast and pray. I would just like to read a short verse from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 22, verse 30. The Lord says, "So I sought for a man among them who would make a wall and stand in the gap before me on behalf of the land, that I should not destroy it." So this scripture says here today that the Lord is calling for us as a nation, as a people, to stand in the gap about this situation through prayer, to make a wall of prayer. And I believe that if with man it is impossible, the Bible says, with God nothing is impossible. Through our prayers, through our fasting, through our seeking of the Lord, I believe God will do a miracle for our nation. If we believe by faith in the Son of God, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that in this situation with our nation it's impossible, but with Him, as we come together through the seeking of His face in prayer together as a people, the Filipino nation, I believe that God will do something. He will stir up the hearts and minds of men all over the world through the media. He will do miracles in the oceans and do something for our nation that the world will be amazed in as we come together in unity and humility. I think this is a call for our nation, for our people, to stand in the gap for the Philippines, because I believe that God is with those who are humble, and God is with those who seek Him, and God is with those who believe in the truth and walk in His ways. So today, as a representative of the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches, as one of the bishops, and I would like to invite everyone tomorrow to come to the tent here at the Rockwell tent here beside the power plant. Let's all come together as people and pray. It will be at around 3:30 to 6 p.m. tomorrow. Let's all text, let's call everyone to come together. Let's forget all our agendas. Let's come as a people and seek God and ask God to move in behalf of the Philippines. I believe this is a time that we need to come together as a people and pray to the Lord and ask the Lord's favor. And before I'm finished, we have someone from the IFP, which is the Intercessors for the Philippines. I believe Pastor Eddie Guzman needs to say something about this situation as well.
I believe we are in the end days. And in the end days, control is something that you're going to see in nations. The problem today that we have is just like Israel. Israel wants to defend what they have, but the world doesn't believe Israel. What I'd like to tell you is this nation, every nation has a destiny. It has an inheritance. The role of the nation is to make sure that the inheritance that they have will be used in blessing nations. For many years, this nation has been exploited. It is one of the wealthiest nations of the world. The Philippines has the number 2 gold reserves in the world, the number 3 reserve of copper in the world, the number 4 reserve of nickel in the world, the number 5 reserve of manganese in the world, and the number 6 reserve of chromite in the world. Why is it that for many, many years, this nation has not become, has been exploited, but in spite of the exploitation, we still have this number in the world. You know, God is really good about this nation. We're not only a nation that has these natural resources. Our people are very gifted people. There are about 30 million of them scattered all over the world. You go to New York, you go to Europe, you go to anywhere in the world, you're going to see Filipinos. Why? Because God has endowed this nation with very skillful people, knowledgeable people. Now, it's only now that God is making this, showing it to the world. I want you to Google Bloomberg today. Bloomberg declared that the strongest nation in Asia is the Philippines. If you want to see what's happening, in spite of what's happening, we're a strong nation. Our gross international reserve is about 80 billion. We have surpassed even the gross international reserve of Israel. What does it all mean? It means this nation is being revived by God. Only God will revive nations. These nations who have exploited us are going to suffer the consequence of their exploitation. This is the time to rise up as a nation. We're a nation that can manage. Even if we don't need the big nations, we have the resources. Why are they interested with us? Because they know this is filled with resources. If you don't know, Benham Rice, which is just at the right side of Isabela and Cagayan, has been granted to us by the United Nations. And what is Benham Rice? It is about 13 million square kilometers, full of liquefied petroleum gas, full of oil, full of minerals. The world is ready to take that out, but our president is just careful. I tell you this nation is a rich nation. What I like to tell to China is this: you have an inheritance, take care of your inheritance. But our inheritance, don't touch it, because God is going to protect this inheritance. You know what? When China made a declaration after the APEC that you are a small nation, and you are saying those so many things. You know what God did? The next day, their frigate was caught 100 kilometers from Palawan. I like to tell this to China: never touch God's nation. This is the nation of the Lord. God has a purpose for this nation. God wants to use this nation to be a blessing to nations. The nations who exploited us are now suffering because they did not take care of their nations. They did not take care of their own people. We are Filipinos. We take care of what God has given us as inheritance. We take care of our people. We help other nations. If we are going to be a nation that will become prosperous, we would like to give and help other nations. That's our purpose. We're not going to give to any nation what is rightfully ours.
Since we have heard most of our speakers already, before we go to the question and answer, we would like, ma'am, to request just 1 minute of silence and prayer for the safety of Secretary Robredo. So with your permission, just 1 minute silence then for his quick recovery.
Let us all close our eyes. Let us just come before the Lord in thanksgiving and praise for the miracle that He will do in our midst. We thank you, Father, for being a great God to the Philippines. We thank you, Lord, for comforting us even this time, O Lord God, regarding Secretary Robredo's situation right now, O God. Lord, your word says that you are God who is our great help in time of trouble.
Robert Posadas with Gil Santos and Ralph Posadas, my son, who is a network engineer. We're exactly here in the Philippines to launch a media synchronization method. And part of this is to concentrate and focus on global strategic content about global Pinoys, and of course about the Philippines. But let me start off before the question, based on something that I will read, an article, is that just according to my analysis regarding the military treaty with the United States, the nature of which is really military, that's its nature. It's for military intervention or aid. So it applies when China attacks us physically in any one of the islands to occupy, but it's not triggered off by any of the World Court, or for that matter, the United Nations Convention of the Seas. What the United States is for is to stay neutral insofar as the claims are concerned. They are not a court. It is not a court. So it's not for them to decide which claim belongs to each respective countries. But what they're against is the violation of the law of the seas, the navigation of the freedom of the seas. That's what they don't like. They will enforce it. Because after all, it's for the interest of all nations, not just for the United States. Freedom of navigation of the seas. So, to delineate these two, it gives us a glimmer of hope for the United States to come to our aid when we are attacked. Military event, that's when it's triggered. But they made it clear. They are neutral insofar as the claims are concerned, because they are not a court to decide which claim it is. So what they're for is to enforce the law of the navigation of the seas. So that way, if we are attacked, then they will come to our aid. Surely, we have to defend or keep our faith in the United States. Keep faith and trust in the United States. For after all, that's a military treaty between two nations. Now, coming down to some hard facts other than...
So we have to focus on the questions.
Yes, this is the question. Here's a recent article from the New York Times News Service of August 17, 2012. And it says the Japanese authorities arrested 14 Chinese citizens from a Hong Kong-based vessel after some of them staged a protest by landing on a Japanese-controlled island. Can you imagine that? That is also claimed by China. The incident added to the recent flare-up in tensions between Japan and the Asian neighbors over history and territory. Now, what we'd like to do is for everybody to have its own take on it, and in regards to the fact that we may be able to align with Japan and all the other Asian countries.
You were supposed to ask a question, sir.
That's the question. Anybody's take on this article that 14 Chinese nations or citizens landed on a Japanese island?
And the Morning Post newspaper, Hong Kong. I'm just wondering why your Global Day of Protest is being held in Rockwell, which is very hard to go to by ordinary people. Does this show anything about the kind of protest that is developing against China? Are protests only for the wealthy?
You would like to answer that?
Initially, we were talking about FEU because we have some contacts with FEU, and that is also the student, a lot of students there. But knowing that floods and rain can happen anytime in the Philippines, in Manila, okay, we chose to be more safe. And so, since we are here, and I have contacts here, and I live here, we thought that the Rockwell tent would be a better place for a day of prayer and fasting. So in terms of whether we are making it a class, no, it's purely practicality. This is meant for the 100 million Filipinos. And the Filipinos in the diaspora are 10 million. We are here, 90 million. And so we don't expect all of them to come. But we do expect representatives of each group to be there tomorrow. We're expecting between 300 to 500 representative of groups from all sectors of government. So there is no class warfare here. Thank you.
And I really believe that tomorrow is really a day of prayer. So it's focused on prayer, intercession, standing in the gap for the nation. So I think the day of protest would be another day, but tomorrow, correct me if I'm wrong. So tomorrow is focused really on a day of prayer.
You're really free to ask all and any kind of questions.
I'm Alvin Chico from ABS-CBN. The question is actually a follow-up of the woman's question. How crucial is the support of the general populace in this kind of initiative? First, the support of the general populace, and second, the support of government. The second question is, are you satisfied with the Philippine government's initiative in asserting our sovereignty in these islands? Is there something lacking? Is there a need to push harder? Are we being soft? Is the government being soft in asserting our rights here? What do you think? Because this is a private initiative.
Who would like to answer that question?
The Philippine government is being realistic. We are a small nation, 100 million people as opposed to 1 billion. Although we do have a foreign reserve of $80 billion, that is opposed to China's $1 trillion. So the Philippine government is being very, very practical. And in fact, on Thursday, August 16, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Albert de Rosario, came with a speech, a principled Philippine foreign policy, stating in effect, and it is in the internet, when you touch on the Department of Foreign Affairs, and the main thing here is the Philippines is a friend to all countries and enemy to one. And I posit or I affirm that statement by the Department of Foreign Affairs. Why? Because the war, if there is one, will be waged in the Philippines. It's not going to be waged in the United States, although they have sent their fleet and submarines, for all we know, the missiles will hit us. Sino mamamatay? Tayo. Okay, so, let us go by, and as they said, through diplomacy, and that's going on now, through back channels, because in effect, who has the oil? It's within our territory. If they come over here, alam ko magpapakamatay ang mga Filipino. Loko, hindi ka pwedeng tumapak dito. So, as far as China is concerned, they said, we will never initiate war. Never initiate war. So, tablamano. And at the same time, if they do, tayong tatamaan din sila. Okay, but all I'm saying is that I agree with the stand of the President and Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Diplomacy, collaboration, cooperation, and conciliation. This is a wealth that we have. We cannot say, akin lang ito. All our mineral resources are being exploited and being taken out by the Philippines with cooperation of international companies. So, although we own it, we cannot exploit it by ourselves. Kulang ang pera natin, we don't know the know-how. Sino sa mga Filipino, which of our Filipino companies are digging oil? Zero. Wala. Okay, so automatically, we do have to get international cooperation. And China is there, willing to help. Okay? How do I know that? Because before everything has happened, they had filed for a permit to explore around the Malampaya for oil. And they have filed a permit 4 years ago that has not been acted up to now. And by doing that, they recognized our sovereignty because they were asking permission to explore. So there are a lot of leeway to talk. It's just unfortunate that, it reached this part. So for us, as a country, for diplomacy, it is good to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, let's talk. Thank you.
Well, though I support the unity and all that, when it comes to dealing with China, you mentioned that you prefer going to the UN, so I'd assume that Vietnam supports multilateral approach to the problem?
Yes.
Okay, so how does Vietnam intend to solve the dispute with other countries that have overlapping claims in the Spratlys? The Philippines and Vietnam has an overlapping claim on some certain islands. How do you propose we resolve this among ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I can't speak for the Vietnamese government because to a certain extent, the Vietnamese government interest and the Chinese government interests are pretty much the same. I mean, they're communists, right? So it's slightly different from the case in the Philippines. But what I can say is most Vietnamese people do prefer to internationalize it and do prefer to go to the UN. And to a certain extent, that's what the Vietnamese government has said too. They do prefer to not have bilateral agreements, but rather to refer to the UN, to the tribunal. However, it's because China right now refuses to do that. So the only option for the Vietnamese people, for civil society groups like us, is to voice our opinion. That's why we do hold protests in Saigon and in Hanoi, to say that it's not just a policy between government. It has got to involve the people's voice. And the people's voice in Vietnam says that, first of all, the people should be included in the conversation. And secondly, we should refer to the UN. For all claims, whether it's with China or with the Philippines, we should refer to the UN. Yeah. Because there are competing claims that even in fact, regarding historical facts, each side has historical facts behind it. So, yeah, that's what we would prefer. Thank you.
Nicolas.
The name of the media?
South China Morning Post, Hong Kong. Actually, I'm one of your admirers. And I have a blog, but I try to separate being a correspondent of the Hong Kong newspaper and my blog. In any case, I'd like to ask you, it's very unusual for a business person to speak out on this type of highly contentious subject. Why do you feel the need to do it? And has it affected your own business?
I am very aware that China had on a video, national video, showing me as enemy number one because we initiated boycott made in China goods. And they said if she's doing that, then we should boycott the Beatrice stores in the 4 cities in China. Sad to say, or sad for them, but good for me, I have sold everything in China 4 years ago. So I have no business interest in China. Secondly, because I have retired from business, I have the time to stand for things that I am very passionate about. I may be out of the country. I left the Philippines 43 years ago when I got married. But that doesn't mean I get the Philippines out of my heart. You can take me out of the country, but you cannot get the country out of me. So why am I doing this? Because I am Filipina, body and soul. And so when something like this, that impinge on our wealth, that impinge on our territory, that makes a mockery of our integrity as a nation, how can I not stand and say, hey, hindi pwede yan. Thank you.
Carol Ramoran from Solar News. Sir, I'd like to ask about the recent protests that happened in the U.S. How was it? Can you tell us about it? And how is the awareness campaign among Filipinos going in the U.S.? Are they concerned about the Scarborough Shoal dispute, especially with the diaspora? A lot of the Filipinos are not really that concerned on what's happening here. That's what they've been saying. So can you tell us about it? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. I say that's a great question is because she asked specifically, what triggered the Phil-Am protests and what the response has been. Last year when this started, it was not easy. It was very, very difficult. The most difficult thing about it was that we're talking to Filipino Americans. I was born in LA. I grew up in New Jersey and New York. And I only came back to the Philippines myself in my 20s. And so I understand how they think. And I understand that bringing a concern of the Philippines across the planet and bringing it back home and making it relevant was one of the hardest things. I also work with Gawad Kalinga. We raise funds there for the poor. So there's also challenges when you try to make somebody understand from the U.S. how real, one of the things that I was excited about was when we first started this, we had a modest turnout, but that turnout was enough to start what we're doing right now. That's the most important thing. Somebody tells me if I tell 1,000 people and 900 don't care, the 100 that do care are the ones that matter to me. Those are the ones that needed to be heard, that they needed to hear what's going on. When we came in, and I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges still today is that if you ask me, will a Filipino American care truly about this? Well, keep in mind, if we get them in a room like this and they understand the issue in whole, and they feel and realize the fullness of the tragedy that's about to happen, that could happen, that the crisis at hand, when they understand, absolutely they understand and they become part of the movement. But the challenge is, and this is why I call media to help, because there is a breakdown. There is a gap between what's really being interpreted from the situation. Even the Filipinos over here and the Phil-Ams that I hang out with over here, it takes me a while for them to realize, well, I thought the government's handling that. I thought that, I haven't heard anything from the issue in a while. I thought that it had died down. But the reality is, it hasn't died down. And in fact, the fullness of the problem, I get to appreciate, because I've been staying here much longer, I get to watch the news, I read the papers, I get to help put the pieces together. So us as civilians, trying to do this, the breakdown in the last ASEAN conference already shows the limits and the challenges that this government is facing. All we're trying to do here is give them
private enterprise na mga business.